Hello and welcome back to Mossy Bottom. It's now mid-September here in the west of Ireland. How time flies. I can't quite believe how quickly this summer has gone. It won't be long, in fact, before the dozens of swallows living in my outbuildings depart back to Africa to their winter home. But at least the midges are leaving too, so it's not all bad. Right now I'm in the process of editing together the footage for my polytunnel build, which I know I've promised you before in videos. It's definitely coming. And my cabin build, which you can see behind me, more on that later. But in the meantime, I wanted to post a 2-year update video for the garden and for the land to share with you some of the successes, failures and changes here at Mossy Bottom in 2020. So let's start with a big build this year. I started this little cabin back in January, clearing the ground, building a stone wall for the foundation. And I completed the last little job on it in July. So it took the best part of 6 months to make. And it now serves as a completely self-contained home for volunteers, with everything from bunk beds to a kitchen and even a heated shower. I know that sounds normal to you guys, but that's pretty luxurious here at Mossy Bottom. Just like the structure itself, the furniture is all handmade and bespoke, which is why it took me a little longer than I expected to finish. But then, to be fair, most things here take me a little longer than expected to finish. It's just the way I roll, I guess. And apart from the unskilled volunteers, I was the only person working on it, so it was a big job. But I must say I'm delighted at how it's turned out. And I also did it on a really tight budget. The windows and the doors were both freebies, which I had to painstakingly restore. And the sink and shower were completely recycled. In fact, there's loads of things in there that were recycled or reclaimed. It's got electric, it's got gas via a tank, it's got water, which I fill up from my spring. It really has everything you could need to live. And the best part is that I filmed everything about the construction of it. So I've got at least 1, maybe 2 long videos coming up showing you the full construction. I've got hundreds of hours of footage to edit together, which is why it's taking me a while, but I'm so excited to share that with you. There's some amazing moments in there, some disasters and some triumphs as well, so look out for that video, especially if you're interested in building work. Right next to the cabin, we have what I call my summer plot, which is all the veggies that I harvest completely during or at the end of the summer season. And I like to divide my growing areas into summer and winter plots. And you'll see the winter plot shortly, because it means I can repurpose this whole area in a month or 2, either planting a green manure for the winter or digging in compost and then covering it with tarps to protect it. So at the end here, we have a few remaining beetroot and lettuce, which has gone to seed. And I'm kind of encouraging that at this stage because my chickens absolutely adore the flower heads, so it's all going to them. And here we have my sweet corn. And corn is kind of hard to grow outdoors here in Ireland because the summers just aren't hot enough, especially the late summer when it's ripening. But as you can see, this has done pretty well and it's almost ready to harvest. And it's my 3rd successful year of growing corn outdoors, so you really can do it. You just need to choose a hardy variety created for colder climates. This one is called Early Bird, and I definitely recommend it to anyone out there who is living perhaps in Ireland or the UK. My dwarf sunflowers have done marvellously again this year, and the seeds from these monstrous flower heads are just about ready to harvest, as you can see beneath here. In fact, they're falling out as I do that, definitely ready to harvest. I'll be doing that in the coming days. And I use these seeds for bread making, amongst other things. They're also great for the chickens. I cannot recommend this dwarf giant variety enough, especially if you live in a colder climate like I do. I tried for the first few years to grow true giant sunflowers, and they sort of did grow well in terms of height, but at this time of year, by mid-September, instead of the seeds being ready to harvest, the flowers would be kind of in full bloom, which it's just too late because within a week or 2 now we're going to start getting some really cold nights. They just took too long because of that height. But with this dwarf variety, everything is a month quicker. So you get the benefit of flowers coming in sort of July rather than August makes a big difference. These were my summer cabbages. Not looking so good now. All the good ones have been eaten, but unfortunately slugs love eating my cabbages as well, so these ones that are left have kind of been nobbled by the slugs well and truly, especially as I don't use any pesticides here, so there's nothing really to stop them. But the good news is that on a small holding nothing goes to waste, as I've been feeding the remaining bad ones to my pigs and chickens, which absolutely adore them, so there's absolutely no waste, which is wonderful. And the mange too, or sugar snap peas, are an early summer crop, so these have died back quite a bit now, as you can see, and I'll be removing them very soon. But as you can also see behind them, my runner beans, which is a mixture of different varieties, are in their absolute prime. I've been harvesting them now for a few weeks, and they're still flowering at the top. So there's going to be plenty more beans to come for probably the next month. There are two pretty tricky things about using the pigs as organic ploughs in this way, beyond the fact that they tend to compete with each other for the food. The first is moving their house, which you can see in the background, and believe me, it weighs a lot more than it looks. That timber is pretty thick. It takes 2 adults, maybe 3, several hours, having breaks every few meters to shift that thing. I definitely need to solve that problem next year by making something maybe a little more lightweight, I think. The other, even more tricky part is moving Fatso. Titch, the little black one, you can pick up and carry, preferably with some ear protectors because she tends to squeal. But if you pick Fatso up, first you have to have a very strong back because she weighs about 60 kilos at this point. And then you have to deal with the squealing, and worse, the head banging and the projectile pooping, which tends to ensue as soon as you lift her off the ground. I can only apologise to the volunteer who assisted me with that job back in the summer. I'm definitely going to have to figure out some kind of leash method next time around when I want to move her, because that really didn't work very well. But I got her here in the end. My strawberries are looking fantastic again this year. As we're approaching the autumn season, they've been weeded by some very hardworking, diligent volunteers, and all the runners have been put in pots. So next spring I should have a few hundred new plants. And the dead leaves have been removed. There's even some new flowers coming up. And if you cut back the runners and discourage them from spreading like that, you will get more strawberries later in the season. Then we have my winter crop, which has been one of my biggest successes this year. I'm so pleased with it. As you can see, it's mostly brassicas. From top to bottom here we have kale, we have kohlrabis, then we have Brussels sprouts, we have Swedes, then we have some purple sprouting broccoli, some winter cabbage, and then at the end we have a mixture of leeks and some more Brussels sprouts and purple broccoli. And one thing I got wrong last year was not adequately staking the brassicas as they started to grow. We get really strong winds blowing through here, especially in the early summer. And my brassica plants often get uprooted and turned on their side in that first sort of month after I planted them out. But this year I was much quicker at spotting that problem and staking them to hold them straight, which allows the roots to get established quicker. I also realized this year that it pays to keep about 30% of your seedlings spare after you've filled up your rows, because you need them for filling gaps, because you do tend to lose the odd plant. Either it doesn't grow very well or it gets eaten by slugs or some other critter. So it really pays to kind of have too many seedlings for the space that you want to fill. Another thing I learned last year was to thin the lower leaves of most of the brassicas in order to improve ventilation and prevent mildews forming. It's especially important actually in the late summer, so at this time of year, as the plants reach their maximum size, because they tend to push out as much as they can, and lots of the leaves will drop and touch the ground and start to go mouldy, and if you leave them, that mould will spread. And one of the great things, if you keep pigs, chickens, rabbits, or all three like me, then these leaves become a kind of weekly feast for your animals right through the summer and into the autumn. So nothing is wasted. And this area will remain like this right through the winter. And that's what I mean when I say a summer crop and a winter crop. I'll harvest from it continuously, finishing with the purple sprouting broccoli next spring. I'll then let it all go to flower, interplant clover in the rows to lock nitrogen back into the soil. And finally, before everything goes to seed, midsummer of next year, I'll bring the pigs back in here to clear it all for me, and they'll have an absolute feast, and they'll turn it back into soil like you can see in the plot next to me. And it's that interconnectedness which I love so much about managing a smallholding. Everything serves 2 or 3 other things, just like in nature. It's a system which appears chaotic, but is in fact beautifully organized. And managing that is just such a pleasure. Behind me you can see my newly created polytunnel, but I'm not going to talk too much about that or show you inside at this point, because it's about to feature its very own video, which is literally on the cutting room floor as we speak. It's going to be out very, very soon, so please stay tuned for that. It's going to be an exciting one. So I decided this spring to build a dedicated overwinter chicken area on high ground, and it's worked out really well. I now have 4 different varieties of chickens. We have Rhode Island Reds, which were the first I got, a very loud quacking duck, which we'll get to in a minute, cream leg bars, buff Orpingtons, and cuckoo Morans, which are my newest ones. Some of you may remember Elvis, my cockerel. Well, he's moved to a new home this summer, allowing me to introduce some new blood into the flock. And I must admit, I do slightly miss hearing his untimely crowing, be it at 3 a.m. in the morning or whenever I started the lawnmower or chainsaw or some other device, which Elvis always liked to compete with. I think being an only rooster, he never quite worked out what other roosters are supposed to sound like. And this little guy will, I hope, be Elvis's replacement. I call him Vulture Strong Peck McLongneck. He's one of my cuckoo Moran chicks, the tamest. And I named him that because he has an exceptionally long neck, a fearsome peck, and is always first to come for any food, just like a vulture. I can't wait to hear what kind of crow he has. Hello. So here we have my root area, occupied overwhelmingly by carrots, as you can probably see. Back in April, I broadcast sowed about 60,000 seeds, a mixture of Autumn King and Eskimo varieties, which are both pretty hardy. Why so many, you're asking? Well, carrots are one of my absolute favourite crops to grow here because they taste so much sweeter when freshly harvested than the carrots you buy in the store. And I think for that reason, they also sell really well at my stall. Definitely a favourite with the locals. And of course, the pigs and the rabbits can't get enough of them. Another bonus with carrots is that you can leave them in the ground well into the winter and they won't rot. For me at least, that's the safest place from rodents. Of course, you lose a few to slugs and other pests, but I guarantee I'll still be harvesting these carrots in February or March, maybe even later. Trust me when I say you can never have too many carrots on a small holding. And they're pretty easy to grow too. I don't bother with rows or trenches, I just broadcast sow and then lightly rake over them. I thin them as I eat them, starting with baby carrots in the early summer. There are 2 things that I have to do for carrots in order for them to crop well though. Firstly, dig the soil really well. Carrots need especially friable, crumbly soil. So this is one of the few areas that I use a rotavator on. And secondly, cover the seeds with bird netting for the first month to stop the blackbirds coming in and lifting up all the little seedlings before they get established. So this was my potato crop this year. And as you can see, there isn't that much of it left, at least not above ground. Here in the west of Ireland, late summer, kind of August, September, is always the time of year that blight strikes. I've had it every year since I've been here on my potato crop, and this year was no different. But as soon as I notice it on the potatoes, on the leaves, I immediately cut them all off, right down to the bottom of the stem. and that stops the blight from spreading down into the tubers. And by that time of year, mid to late August, if you get the tubers in early, April, which is when I planted them, then you tend to have a bumper crop already in the ground. You don't really need them to get any bigger. So we still have potatoes in the ground. You can't see them, but there's probably thousands in there. Each row is about 2 wheelbarrows. I've only harvested the top row, so yeah, 2, 4, 6, 8. There's at least 10 wheelbarrows of potatoes, enough hopefully to last me right through the winter and into next spring. So those of you who watched my Cooney pig video earlier in the summer may remember them being located here in the farthest plot on my land. A few months ago though, I moved them, as I talked about earlier, leaving this area free of weeds, apart from the odd nettle root, or the odd wheelbarrow load of nettle roots, to be perfectly honest. But that's just because this area has never been cultivated before, so it went from being wild and overgrown with nothing but weeds to pigs. And all I've done since I took the pigs out is loosely fork in a few buckets of compost for each row, and then cover them up with tarps for the winter. And the tarps will stop any additional weed growth towards the end of summer and into the autumn. And they'll also prevent nitrogen from leaching out of the soil if we get heavy rain over the winter, which we probably will. In the spring, I'll roll up the tarps and the soil will be rich, it'll be crumbly, and it'll be ready to plant straight into. This, I think, is going to be my summer crop, or maybe my winter crop next year. Whoever said dogs a man's best friend never owned a pig, believe me. The duck area has just undergone a renovation, as you can, I think, see. We have a new, much higher fence to try and contain them better in the winter, because the old one they could just kind of climb up and escape over. We've also got 2 new recruits, which I think you can see at the front here. These are called Curtis and Patsy, my new Abercott Rangers, which is a rare duck breed, which to my knowledge nobody else in this part of Ireland keeps. They're wonderful foragers, so great for slug hunting, and apparently, unlike most varieties of duck, they even go broody in the spring. I've yet to see that myself, but going broody just means they'll lay on their eggs to raise young, where most ducks just don't do that. And you can see, I think in the background there, I made a duck swimming pool out of an old IBC tank. This is for those winter months when I need to keep them in here to prevent my my spring being turned into a mud pit, which ducks have a habit of doing very, very quickly. Because of course I need that water. I use it for the caravan and for the cabin for washing and things. So sometimes I need to keep them in here, and I don't want to deprive them of the chance to swim year round. Finally, this area which separates my land into 2 halves has now been turned into what I call my flower forest. I planted 3 main things here: comfrey, borage, and loads of nasturtiums, all of which are edible in some form, and all of which are fantastic pollinators. And the whole summer long, this has been a non-stop cacophony of buzzing and activity. The bees, the pollinators absolutely love it. And even now in mid-September, it's actually more like late September, you can still see it's laden with flowers and insect life. And this is a bit of a precursor for what's to come here at Mossy Bottom, because I'm hoping in the next 1 to 2 years, depending on how quickly I can get things organised, to get beehives and start producing my own honey. Because as you all know, I do have a bit of a sweet tooth, so being able to produce my own honey would be amazing. And I reckon this lot should keep them pretty well fed. So that's just about it for this update video. I hope everyone else has had as fruitful a summer in 2020 as I have. It's been a really busy year, but I've got loads done. I'm super proud and couldn't be happier. Stay tuned for more videos in the coming weeks. I promise they're not far off. Until then, from me, from Moss, and all the animals here at Mossy Bottom, bye for now.